Hey everybody, Hugh here. Welcome back. Well, I'm just sitting on the front step having a coffee before I head off on some more adventures, and I said I better do an update for this week. And I think the courtyard here is the most obvious place to do the update. It's where all the colour is and all the interest is. There's a blaze of colour there on the staging area, and then as we pan around to the pot pond area, you can see there's more interest and colour there too, and it's looking very nice indeed. There's the new bird feeder we fitted. It's a very nice piece, even if they never use it. It looks great. And some brunnera having seeded itself in around the gate post area, and then over to where the bulbs were that were dying back, but we've shifted them out and the palms have come out. And finally a chemisia literally tickling my ear as I'm sitting here having the coffee. And some folks have commented about the rhubarb underneath growing in pots as well, so it's quite a nice area. More to do, of course, but just enjoying the overall effect. Judith was out sweeping away. Very much so, because there's a lot of changes even since last week. This time of year there's a lot of changes going on. I'll go into some of those now, but just while we're sitting here having our coffees, we'll enjoy the overall effect, and we can get into a bit of detail. Of course, for those of you that take a wander off and don't watch some of the detailed pieces, that's fine. It's nice for you to stop by. Do please leave a thumbs up to help my rhythms and my algorithms and all of that type of thing. Give it an old thumbs up there. Of course, comments, particularly nice comments and questions, are always welcome. Always welcome too. The day itself, weather-wise, you can see it's fairly overcast here. We had rain yesterday and we had sunshine. The solar pump that's in the pot pond there, which is barely working at the moment, yesterday evening was going great guns, so that was a treat to see. There we go. Sorry, just getting the focus back in again. Anyway, I'm being lazy now because I'm still sitting here drinking my coffee. And of course, tulips, which we said were on their way a couple of weeks ago, you can see Storm Kathleen, even though we had some of them in shelter, has brought along with it hailstones and cold. The hailstone and cold have peppered some of the tulip bulbs that are there. Because we had some of them in under cover protecting them was great, but once you get more than a day or two, they tend to stretch, because the bulbs, like the daffodils and the tulips, they are cold weather plants, and if you have them in under heat like we had them, they tend to stretch and go over and flower fairly quickly. So I was quite anxious not to have them in for too many days, but still you can see the effect on some of them there, where they're naturally, I suppose, going over. But the weather went against us this year, and that's okay. It's what you'd expect, you know. We were lucky we didn't get it worse, I suppose, says he optimistically, with the colds and the frost, but the storms did pay. Look at those Paris tulips. There is a name buried in there underneath, but they're one of the Paris tulip types. What's the main change that you'll actually notice this year is as the bulbs are being diminished and dying back, and they're going into an area for feeding and a little bit of care. What's replacing them are very much some of these herbaceous plants, the likes of the hookeras that survived over winter. The vine weevil did attack them, but they have survived. They've been brought on a little bit, so if we do get any cold frosty nights, they'll be going back in under cover. Alstroemeria there, looking very well. You can see the flower buds on it, and in contrast, we've still got the winter heather in flower, but you can see the herbaceous colours are coming along there, replacing the bulbs. That's a euphorbia, and of course that is, people will know it as forest flame. It is of course a pieris, and look at, that's why it's grown. It's grown for that particular colour. Quite amazing to see. It really is. It's stunning, in fact. Makes an impact, and combining that with the likes of the red azalea flowers, and it's ablaze. And the red azalea, the plant looks terrible at most of the year, but when it flowers, my goodness, it makes itself known. And that combined, those two reds combined with some of the purple foliage and the yellow then as a contrast, really is a lovely, lovely effect. Palmonium Heavenly Blue just starting to come into flower. That was tucked into the tunnel there, and so we're taking it and hardening it off. It's replacing the white tulips that were there, and of course there's red tulips. You would have seen that in last week's. And people have been asking, what's this white plant? Well, I'm going to leave you to have a guess. Have a guess what it is. I'll answer queries. If you do guess in the comments, I'll answer below. But isn't it stunning? And of course, some of my flowers, metallicus. So I made out of recycled, complementing some of Judith's crafts as well. You can see the ladybird and the Celtic spiral of life in various colours. Very nice. So that's the change, the biggest change really. Sorry, I'm walking back over to get my coffee as we do the tour. That particular stand does need to be repainted or recycled. It is breaking up a bit, but you know, it's been out for 3 years, so what can you expect? And of course the hostas, that one had a little bit of protection there, so it's growing very nicely. Can you see the copper band, which you know needs to be tightened up underneath on it? So that helps keeps the slugs and snails away. There's a bit of a tip if you can't use copper banding. And the dianthus, again, we had it under cover just for a few days there, but it is hardening off nicely, and those flowers are lovely and scented. If you're buying dianthus, definitely look out for some of the scented varieties, particularly the more modern ones that flower all summer. I know, John, you'd mentioned about the plan for the palms that we had, so they've been undercover, and it really is just to lend a touch of greenery. Or why do we have so many of them? Judith being from Catalonia, some of her native vegetation, so it's a case of bring some of her world into the potager, or even into the courtyard even. You know, that influence. And you can see working, bubbling away very nicely. Still no sign of the fish. Anytime I approach, they tend to duck away, and because I'm not the one that feeds them, they tend to recognize who feeds them, which is funny. Still some daffodils, some of the late daffodil colour. We didn't pot those until December. No, probably January actually. So they're a little bit later than the ones we already had in pots. And variegated Brunner. We moved the little fairy out. Solar panel underneath that unit. There you go. Lights it up very nicely at night. I know there's discussions around should you have night lights and that in the garden, but these are all very subtle. It doesn't tend, I don't think, to disorientate. And there you go. A little bit of bird food while they get used to the fact that they can potter in there and hang. Just a shot of the grow houses, the glass house. Ed, if you're watching, you can actually see the polycarbonate sheets did a great trick. Thank you so much. They really are a treat to have. So Ed took a look at one of the videos there about a month ago, and he said, oh, I've got some polycarbonate sheets you could possibly use. So they slotted in very nicely, a bit of trimming, not only along the sides but along the top. There's a sort of an offset of, I'd say, about 10 degrees the way that the glass house leans forward, so there was a little bit of trimming top and bottom, but the effect is superb. It really is, so much appreciated there. Now back over to this side, and again you can see more palms, just giving a nice effect. Those ivies that have been in the pots over winter. The recycled ladybird is there as well, and the Cornus controversa variegata, the wedding cake tree, has broken into leaf. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? It is actually growing in quite a big pot. I know what you're saying, Hugh, that's not a pot, that's a bucket. But ignore that. It's growing in quite a big pot. The good soil base on it to get it up to such a nice height, but we do have to top dress and enrich, you know, so it's got a nice bit of food for the year. Becoming pot bound when they get to this size is probably going to be the biggest challenge for them. So you can see with it there, trees and pots, they can do, but you just have to be careful with them. And spinning around, you can see hidden in the recycled flowers that are going to be there for next year, the bulbs. There's a nice little lupin coming up that we might extract from there. And finally around to the Camiscia, which was blown over, and I've restaked it again. So a little bit of work after the storms, or the storm, and then the high winds after the storm. If you're wondering why there's a big tomato tray there, that's because in the glass house, I don't want to spin you around too quickly, having a feeling too dizzy, but I'm going to spin around anyway. I'm going to pan around as gently as I can in the glass house, and I don't know if you'll see them from here. We have tomato plants. Yeah, we have tomato plants growing. So we're taking them in each evening because we've no heat. And they sit on that particular tray overnight, and then we pop them back out during the day. It was particularly important when, if you look back at the last video where we were showing the grow houses, there was actually holes in the sheets on top, and it wasn't a good space at all. And the nighttime temperatures were long. The nighttime temperatures were, you know, were cooler and longer, whereas the nighttime temperatures, they still can be quite cool, but at night. But the days are warmer with the longer sunshine. So hopefully we won't have to be bringing the tomatoes in and out for much longer. But we'll see. We'll see. It's still early days. So that's giving you a fair update, and for Judith and I a bit of a record of what's going on in the middle of April here in the courtyard. Thanks as always for watching, for liking and subscribing, and of course, as I said earlier, comments and questions are welcome. Meantime, do look after yourselves, have a good week there, and sure won't we see you on the next one. All the best for now. Take care. Bye bye.